for attending New York State Fraternal Order Police. I'm just going to bring up a couple of people. They'll announce some of the dignitaries. I personally want to thank some of the unions, the fraternal groups that have come out today to help with this endorsement, with this press conference. First, we'll bring up from the 19th Assembly District, Ed Ray.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join with you this morning with our next governor and lieutenant governor, Lee Zeldin and Allison Esposito. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for your service to our communities, for keeping us safe. And I can't wait for our new governor to help restore public safety in New York State. And I'm glad to be joined here with some of my colleagues in government, Steve Rhodes, Jim Cole, and Jake Blumenkrantz, a couple of our state legislative candidates. We're ready to go up to Albany with our new governor and restore common sense and order to New York State. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, I'd like to bring up the Town of Oyster Bay Supervisor Joe Saladino.
Thank you, Mike. We're proud in the Town of Oyster Bay to stand with law enforcement. We're proud and appreciative of the people who put their lives on the line to protect our residents. Anyone who owns a television knows that it is the most dangerous time New Yorkers have ever seen. It is wild what's going on in the streets. People get arrested and they're back out on the streets to recommit their crimes, no matter how devious and dangerous their crimes are. And when it comes to sex offenders, it is outrageous and disgusting that sex offenders arrested for luring children on the internet while on probation are allowed a computer and internet service, and if they can't afford it, this administration wants taxpayers to pay for it? Well, we're good and ticked off about that. And there's only one answer to bringing sanity and safety back to New York State, and that's making sure that Lee Zeldin and his team, including Allison Esposito, are the next governor and lieutenant governor of the state of New York. We stand proud with law enforcement, and after the last 2 years of people yelling, defund the police, which makes absolutely no sense, and it makes every community, including urban communities, far more dangerous, we want to make sure that police are protected so they can do their jobs in protecting us. And once again, we're endorsing and asking New York to vote for Lee Zeldin, to make sure these Republican candidates in the state Senate and the state Assembly are there in force, to support the common sense policies, the pro-police policies, and the pro-New Yorker policies that Lee Zeldin will bring. Let's make sure our next governor is Lee Zeldin.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. My name is Mike Essig. I'm the president of New York State Fraternal Order Police. With over 64 lodges and 20,000 members active and retired in the New York State. Today we are here among our building, our state building, which represents, like I said, over 20,000 members. Behind me is our police memorial. Our police memorial represents and has the names of over 1,700 members and active and retired, all law enforcement that have died and committed and basically has lost their life in the line of duty. They made the ultimate sacrifice. These names will never be forgotten. We also have a tribute panel to 9/11. That tribute panel is for the 72 officers that perished on 9/11. Today, the New York State Fraternal Order Police had the opportunity to survey who our members would choose to endorse for the race for the highest office in New York State. Our membership choose to endorse Congressman Lee Zeldin and Allison Esposito in their candidacy for governor and lieutenant governor. Allison Esposito is an active member of the Fraternal Order Police due to their call for order and public safety as crime surges across the state. Today, I thank you, and Mr. Congressman, we look forward to you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Now, for those of you who might be tuning in on social media or after the fact, you might not see just how many amazing current and former law enforcement are here with us today. It's as personal as this gets. Just 2.5 weeks out from an election to decide the future of the state of New York. We have New Yorkers who are deciding every day that their American dream is no longer a New York dream. We have New Yorkers who every day are changing their behavior. Where they used to walk on a street, they find themselves taking an Uber. If they used to ride a subway freely, maybe their hours have been condensed. Maybe when they're waiting on a subway platform, they're hugging a pole or grabbing a guardrail. Maybe if they're Jewish, they're taking off their yarmulke. New Yorkers have been so personally impacted by rising crime. I even had 2 Sundays ago a gang-related drive-by shooting on my front yard. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. I'm a sitting 4-term member of Congress running for governor of the state of New York. And 2 Sundays ago, that happened at my front house with my daughters just sitting at home on a quiet, peaceful Sunday afternoon doing their homework. This isn't just a New York City issue. And we see the video and the pictures, the stories coming out of New York City, and it's gut-churning, it's heartbreaking. But at the same time that you read about what happened at my house, you read about a Long Island dad who's visiting his kid for parents' weekend up in Marist, getting a cup of coffee, checking out of a hotel, and gets caught in lobby gunfire and loses his life. At the same time, a mother of 3 just outside of Buffalo, just a few Wednesdays back, 2 weeks ago, in front of her own 3 kids, and wearing a bulletproof vest. That's how much she feared for her safety. She was killed by a husband who was released the day prior, despite being charged with a slew of domestic violence offenses. Despite Kiera Hudson telling anyone who would listen, "You can't release him, he will murder me." He got released on Tuesday, and the next day, she got murdered in front of her 3 kids wearing a bulletproof vest. The laws of the state of New York, in many respects, are making these crime stories, the stats, the victims, more prevalent. We can recap the stories from the last 2 weeks. You'd think we're recapping the highlights of the highest profile events of the last 2 years. A woman in the Howard Beach subway station gets attacked by a guy who had once killed his own grandparent, violates his parole this past August, and because of the Less is More Act, the parole officer was unable to keep him detained, and now this woman may not be able to recover her eyesight because he wasn't locked up. Whether it's a judge with a strict, stern, serious, dramatic warning of a wife, of a mother who may be murdered a day later. Whether it's 2 Mexican cartel drug smugglers who get busted with $1.2 million worth of crystal meth. Whether it's a person who gets released after a long prison sentence for rape, getting arrested in February, released, rearrested the next month in March and released, and then this past August, arrested again for committing another rape. The list goes on of where we have seen a need to overhaul Castle's bail and give judges discretion to weigh dangerousness here in the state of New York. Our corrections officers and other prison staff and even inmates have been assaulted more since the April 1st implementation of the HALT Act. Our law enforcement scrambling to try to deal with the discovery law changes rather than focusing on being able to just do their jobs. Kids, teenagers, because of raise the age being used to commit crime after crime after crime after crime, because the people who are using them know that these kids are not going to 15 years old, 16-year-old, we're talking about teenagers. They're going to go to the family court instead of the criminal court. I get the best of intention. You don't want some kid committing their first offense and being stuck into a pipeline to prison. But what happens when the result of your law results in these kids committing more crimes than they would have otherwise? What are we going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you what we'll do about it. The first step on November 8th is firing Kathy Hochul and ending one-party rule up in Albany. I'll tell you what we're going to do about it. The first action, the first day that we're in office, is sending a message to any district attorney out there who doesn't want to enforce the law, that there are consequences, because the New York State Constitution says in this state where we don't have recall election, a governor has what is not just a constitutional authority, but I would say a constitutional duty to remove a DA who refuses to enforce the law. So we are telling you, Alvin Bragg, on day one, action one, you are being fired for your refusal to enforce the law. I was asked Sunday morning on an interview, what are you going to do in your first 100 days? I responded by saying, well, actually, the even better question is, what are you going to do in your first 100 minutes? And there's a lot to do on day one. Plan A would be to work with the legislature. I know we have some colleagues, Ed Raw would come to the table in a heartbeat to fix this stuff and to make safety on our streets top of mind. Senator Rhodes would be right there on day one, moment one, to work together. We have a number of great state legislators and state legislative candidates who are here because that's their focus. But what we know is that you have a whole bunch of people who are in charge right now of the state legislature who won't come to the table. And as a matter of fact, they will attack all of us personally by advocating that there should be an overhaul of cashless bail. So what we will do on day one is declare what Kathy Hochul should have done a long time ago, what she could do today, but she won't because she's scared to stand up to the pro-criminal allies that she has in her base in the state legislature and beyond. We are going to declare a crime emergency in the state of New York, and we are going to suspend cashless bail, raise the age, the HALT Act, less is more, and the discovery law changes. I was raised in a law enforcement household. I'm an FOP member, proudly. I spent my week inside of a law enforcement household. I spent my weekend inside of another law enforcement household because my parents were divorced and remarried. We were surrounded by law enforcement growing up. We were surrounded by amazing, selfless, dedicated men and women who weren't serving for themselves. They weren't serving just for their families. They were serving for strangers too. They're willing to give up their life to defend strangers who might have even spat in their face minutes earlier because it's their job, it's their duty, it's their calling. I couldn't be more honored to stand here today and very proudly accept the endorsement of the amazing men and women of the New York State FOP. The Fraternal Order of Police have endured through years and decades. The FOP will live on strong here in the state. But the way that you continue serving mostly when you're retired, the FOP is also made up of people who are still serving, is to look out for the young men, the young women who are just entering the ranks today. What can you do as someone who might have retired even 20, 30 years ago to pay it forward, to give back, to set up that next generation. That's why we are all here today, to secure our streets, to make sure that pro-criminal laws are being rolled back, to make sure that DAs who refuse to enforce the law are being held accountable, but also to ensure that we are unapologetically and proudly backing all of our men and women in active law enforcement and everyone to follow. They attack qualified immunity. They attack the right of self-defense. At times, they make allegations against the innocent as if they're just guilty before an investigation, before a hearing. We need to do this for those men and women in law enforcement who should be held and treated as heroes, but instead are having the handcuffs placed on them rather than the criminals. Not just to be our next lieutenant governor. Esposito is all in. I'm all in. All the men and women who are here are at helm, understanding that the power belongs to the people, not to some emperor governor, some emperor lieutenant governor. And we will do everything in our power, starting moment one, day one, to return these streets back to law-abiding New Yorkers. Without any further ado, our state's next Lieutenant Governor, Allison Esposito.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. It is an amazing morning, and it's absolutely fitting that we're standing in front of the police memorial, honoring those heroes that gave their life in the service in the call of duty. This is personal to me. It's absolutely personal to me. As the congressman said, almost 25 years with the New York City Police Department, and I had no intention of retiring. I had no intention of leaving this job early. I am a public servant. But what I saw as the commander of the 70th Police Precinct in Brooklyn was my officers going out every day, interacting with some of the most violent criminals, repeat offenders, arresting individuals with loaded illegal firearms on their waistbands, sometimes 2, 3, and 4 times. Same criminals. And those perpetrators were back in the precinct collecting their property to go home before my officers were even done processing the arrest. We have a criminal justice system now that apologizes for itself by releasing violent individuals to reoffend back onto our state and city's streets. It's unacceptable. And in Albany, they have turned a blind eye to it. They have put criminals before good and decent, law-abiding New Yorkers. They actually think New Yorkers are fools. They tell New Yorkers they are not to believe their own eyes, that it's only a few extra crimes in the subway every day. It's only a few extra crimes on the streets. What about those victims? New Yorkers are feeling it. New Yorkers are afraid to use mass transit. New Yorkers are afraid to let their children play in parks. And the Democrats, well, you have Democratic Assembly members or city council members that offer their advice to not call the cops when you're dealing with an emotionally disturbed individual or a violent felon, to perhaps spill your soda to distract them. Or maybe say, didn't we go to school together? As they're attacking you. They are out of touch, devoid of reality. And New Yorkers are waking up and seeing it. Who cannot protect themselves deserve to be protected. So I took a step away from my endorsement, those who go out every day and put themselves and their families on the line. Imagine a day as a cop. Your first call, an older lady who needs somebody to talk to or can't afford groceries, so you go out and get her lunch. The call after that could be responding to a home where you're arresting daddy for doing unspeakable crimes to Junior. And then your final call of the day could be your final call. It could be where you're asked to put yourself on the line and take a bullet for a stranger. And that's where your life ends, your career ends, and your day ends. We need to be doing more to fund and support our police. We need to give them the training. We ask them to do so much. We need to give them the training, the resources, and the tools to do the job that we ask of them with the compassion that we demand, with the professionalism that we demand. We need to back our blue. Now, I did a morning show today, WGY with Doug, and they have Mornings with Doug, and they coined a phrase. It was Zelmentum. Okay, now this was to describe the momentum that Congressman Zeldin has now in the polls, closing the gap, bringing common sense back to New York. And they coined the phrase Zelmentum. And we wouldn't have the Zelmentum we have without each and every one of you being out here today and saying, enough. We want our state back, we want our country back, we want our freedoms back, we want our personal accountability back, and we will be backing law enforcement come November 8th when we make it clear. When we make it clear, when we make it very clear to those in Albany that your time is done, the common sense wave is here, and we will be taking our state back. Thank you so much for being out here today. Thank you for your endorsement. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Mike.
That concludes our press conference. I want to thank the members. I want to thank the executive board. I want to thank the fraternal groups and the unions to come out and support Congressman Lee Zeldin and Allison Esposito. Listen, we got to get out and vote. Enough is enough. Let's go.